Yep. Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the special council meeting for November 22nd, 2010 to order. This is a special council meeting. Just a reminder, since it is a special council meeting, we cannot add anything to the agenda. We have two things on the agenda. The first one is the Humane Society of the Black Hills, and number two is the fiscal 2011 budget review. Before we get started, Charlene, if you please take roll in determination of a quorum, please.
Davis. Here. Hadcock. Kroger. Costello. Quaker.
Here.
Waugh.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Mason.
Here.
We have quorum.
Very good. Just a reminder, if you do have a cell phone or a pager, we'd please ask that you either turn those off or put it into the vibrate mode. Also, if you do need to take a phone call, we would ask that you go out in the hallway so you don't disturb the rest of the meeting. With that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to, the President City Council, Ron Kroger, as I will be available for any questions or comments as far as part of the item number 2, which is the 2011 budget review. With that, President Kroger.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Mayor stated, the first item on the agenda is the Humane Society of the Black Hills, and I do have one speaker request form, and that's from Phyllis Okrepke. Phyllis, do you want to start it out?
I'd like to thank you for taking the time to consider our comments regarding the annual renewal of the Humane Society City of Rapid City contract. I'd first like to ask for all the Humane Society employees, board members, volunteers, and other supporters to please stand. I'd also like to take a minute to introduce Coon and Possum. Coon and Possum are two of the nearly 8,000 animals that come through and are served by the Humane Society each year. Thank you. By virtue of Title VI in the Rapid City Municipal Ordinances, this city has undertaken certain obligations, many of which are provided for in state law respecting the care, treatment, and control of animals. Rather than performing these services within the municipal structure, however, Rapid City has elected to contract out these services with the Humane Society of the Black Hills. We're grateful for the opportunity to serve our community, and we take our duties very seriously. The Humane Society receives between 7,000 and 8,000 animals per year. Approximately 75% of these animals come from Rapid City. Our daily cost of operation is almost $2,180. Under our current contract with the City of Rapid City, we receive approximately $663 per day, which represents 30% of our daily operating cost. As you can see, this means that the Humane Society enters into any given fiscal year at a severe fiscal disadvantage. Our organization has certainly not been exempt from the tough economic times. We have cut all corners we possibly can. We have stepped up fundraising and donation solicitation efforts. We have taken steps to make our buildings more energy efficient. We are running on a skeleton staff and have increased our volunteer base. We have a full-time vet, which has significantly reduced costs in areas where we formerly outsourced veterinary services, and has also enabled us to implement a low-cost spay-neuter program, which in turn helps reduce the pet population and decreases our long-term costs. At the same time, over the past year, we have remained faithful to our mission by increasing the number of pet adoptions, working with regional rescues to control our in-house population, and significantly reducing euthanasia rates. We are working towards improving the internal efficiencies of our operation by running a national job search for an operations manager. The operations manager will be charged with many duties, one of which being to find methods by which our shelter can run at maximum efficiency while remaining faithful to our mission of caring for the homeless, abused, or abandoned animals. We want to thank our dedicated staff and the continued support from our generous community for helping us remain a viable organization. Unfortunately, at this juncture, despite all the positive changes I have just mentioned, we continue to operate in the red. We are here to request an increase in funding from the city. Otherwise, we will be forced to cut certain services in order to remain viable. We are requesting a 15% increase in our contract amount, which equals an increase of $36,300. If the city agrees to this increase, our services will remain the same. In order to provide you an accurate depiction of our intentions, please consider the following. If we receive a 10% increase of our contract amount with the city, which equals an increase of $24,200, we will reduce our public access hours of operation from 40 hours per week to 35 hours per week. If we receive a 5% increase of our contract amount with the city, which amounts to an additional $12,100, we will reduce our hours of public access operation from 40 to 30, and will also eliminate after-hours animal control services. Finally, if we receive no increase to our contract amount with the city, we will reduce our hours of operation from 40 to 30, will eliminate after-hours animal control services, and will also cut one animal control officer position. As I previously mentioned, approximately 75% of our animal intake is from within the Rapid City limits. Currently, the city is funding us with only 30% of our daily operational needs. There is a significant gulf between the amount of services we are providing to the city and the funding we are receiving from the city. The Humane Society provides vital functions to this community. We take in animals brought in as stray, neglected, abused, or abandoned. It is our goal to only euthanize those animals that are gravely ill or dangerously aggressive. When it is necessary to euthanize, we do so humanely. We offer low-cost adoptions to those families that desire canine or feline companionship in their homes. All animals that leave our facility are spayed or neutered, microchipped, licensed, vaccinated, and wormed. These safeguards help control the pet population, increase the chances that a lost animal will be returned to his owner, and ensures that we adopt out healthy animals. We care for and love animals that cannot find homes, and we do everything we can to make sure that every animal who is medically and behaviorally adoptable is adopted into a loving home. We ask for your serious consideration and support when deliberating on the renewal of this contract. As I mentioned, I have several individuals here on behalf of the Humane Society, including staff members. We would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Like to speak? I think a lot of the people here were involved in crafting this statement because we met as a group to do that. So
I do have the 2010 budget amount, that is $242,018. I believe that that is what was budgeted for 2011, and I want to say that was also what was budgeted in 2009.
Yes, we received no increase.
Okay. Mayor?
Hello, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, going back to 2008, the dollar amount that they were receiving was $235,000. It was raised in 2009 to the $242,000 and has remained there since. So 2009, 10, and 11 are all the same dollar amount, which is $242,000.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll hold my question. We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Hi, thank you, and thank you all for all the good work you do with those animals. It's a real asset to the community. You talked about cutting hours. What are your current hours that you may have said, but I didn't.
We're open Wednesday. I'll let Kent, he is familiar with the exact hours.
The shelter currently is open 9 to 6, Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 5 on Sunday.
And then we have people there 7 days a week caring for the animals. Those are just the hours that we are open to the public.
Thank you.
A question for you. If the alternative is we can't come up with additional funding, explain just exactly what that does to the city.
Basically, the big portion, of course, is in the zero growth process that was in this budget, with no after hours on call and only one animal control officer. Last year alone, we handled 4,300 calls with 2 of us. We'll be down to 1 and not doing any on call, so that's going to lay a lot of responsibility on to Mr. Allender and his staff, because I can't make 4,300 calls in a year by myself.
I know the chief has been looking for something to do. Chief, do you have any comments regarding that?
Well, I don't have the data tonight to tell you how many calls our folks already handle related to animal calls, but I could certainly find that and see what kind of an impact this is. The bottom line is these, whatever the number of calls is, we take them onto the PD and we can calculate the cost of doing that business.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Dave Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Phyllis or Kent, really doesn't matter which one of you feels up to this one. You mentioned that part of the procedure in preparing one of these animals for adoption is that you microchip them.
Yes.
Roughly what does that cost per animal?
Our cost on a microchip is approximately $4 an animal.
Okay, and you're doing how many animals a year?
Give or take, between the strays and everything else, there's probably close to 6,000 animals get microchipped. I mean, I don't have that exact figure, but I'd be close.
And the benefit of the microchip in the long, I mean, there's our $24,000 right there, guys. And
Basically,
so
what
I
it
guess
comes-
that's what I'm looking at, is there a real identifiable benefit that we can say, hey, this is something we can't live without?
Statistically, 80% of animals that have microchips get returned to their owner. 80%. 80.
Okay.
Versus non-microchipped animal, virtually about 1 out of or 2 out of every 100 that's not microchipped that come into our facility ends up back with their owner. Beyond that, most of them, if they don't have a microchip, the owners don't get them found.
Do you give, I'm assuming I know the answer, at this point, you do not give the adopting family the option to chip or not to chip. That's part of.
By city ordinance, every animal that comes through the doors of our facility that are from Rapid City, Pennington County, leave with a microchip.
Okay. The fees that you charge for adoption at this point, you feel are at the maximum that you can and still get people to adopt? Is that?
We have actually had to lower our prices. We tried a higher rate, and our rate of adoption decreased immensely. So as a result, the price has come back down, and the animal adoption rate has increased again. and it's virtually also like a surrender fee. We charge a surrender fee. Any place we have a contract with, it's $20. Any place we do not have a contract with, it's $50 per animal. That doesn't even pay for the first day the animals come in. But at the same time, if we go any higher than that, they're going to dump them out on the street, and then we're going to be chasing them.
It's very, very price sensitive. If you look in the newspaper and there's free dogs, why pay to adopt one, even though ours come out shot, spayed, vetted?
There's a
and
lot
all?
of reasons why, and we all understand that. And I guess where I'm going with all of these is that obviously we could go on with these kinds of questions all night long, but you guys have got the right answers. You've looked at the expense structure. You've tried to keep it down as much as you can. You've looked at your income structure. You've got it at the highest level that you feel the market will bear. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
You're very correct, sir.
You're right where you feel that you have to be on both ends of them, and yet the need is greater than what the dollars are. That's why you're turning to us. You've done your side.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's what I wanted to know, because that's one of the things that we've been asking most everybody that's stepped up here is, have you filled your side of the bucket? And it sounds as though you have. Thank you all very much.
We'll go to Jordan Mason.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Okrepke, for bringing this forward. I am curious, the 15% increase that you're asking for, does that cover the current debts or any obligations that the Humane Society currently has, or is that just to currently keep it running?
It does not cover all of the shortfall. It only covers a portion of the shortfall. We will still have to continue our fundraising, our use of volunteers, and aggressively seek donors, but it helps to allow us to not have to cut back on some services that are the next places that we would make cuts.
Thank you. And I guess I am curious, why the 15%? Why was that number picked over 10% or another percentage?
Well, we looked at different scenarios and what we could continue to provide as services at different levels of increase. And the 15%, with our continued and increased efforts at fundraising and watching our costs, would allow us to continue as is. The others were numbers, and it happened to be that 15% was what it would take to help us balance things and continue at that current level.
So is it my understanding, Ms. Krepke, then, that the 15% is basically just to keep the Humane Society with its current services at the status quo? But
Correct.
without this, we're going to be forced to look at some sort of cut?
Correct. We run at a shortfall every month, and this was meant to cover some of the shortfall, and then fundraising covers the rest.
I appreciate that, Ms. Krepke. I guess I'm just trying to get a better clarification of what exactly we're looking at more precisely. If I may, I'd like to ask our Chief of Police a question now.
Go ahead.
Mr. Allender, it's my understanding that we currently have laws and city ordinances that deal with animal control, and I've noticed after reviewing some of those ordinances that we have fines. It's a Class 2 misdemeanor, which I'm assuming there's a fine that goes along with that, and I was wondering where exactly that money is allocated to, if you would know.
Chief.
Thank you. Good question. About $62 or $67 of each fine goes to the state for law enforcement officer and judges' training funds, automation fees, technology fees, et cetera. The remainder, and I assume we're talking about around $100 ticket, so the remaining $40, 65% of that stays with the city and 35% gets sent to the state. So we get 65% of $40 that comes into somewhere into the general fund.
Appreciate that, Mr. Allender. Out of curiosity, how well do we enforce the current ordinances dealing with animal control? I mean, is it, and I guess to put this another way, is it an issue that kind of in comparison would be something like jaywalking, or is this something that is actively enforced? And I guess I'm just wondering what kind of activity we're looking at.
Basically, I can start that. That's actually what I do. I am an animal control officer. I am one of the two. Like I said earlier, we handled over 4,300 calls last year between welfare checks on animals, barking dog issues, animals at large, and dog bites.
Appreciate that, sir. I guess one of the things I'm looking at is, and I'm wondering if it's a possibility for the rest of this council to maybe ponder here, but if some of the money that we're collecting through animal control and some of the fines and fees that we're collecting, if we could allocate that to supplement this cause. I think this is a worthy cause, and frankly, actually, today I was held up in traffic by two loose Doberman pinschers that were wandering around by my car on Haynes Avenue this morning, and I guess it kind of brings home the importance of the services brought by the Humane Society. So I guess I'm looking for other alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Mayor, we've had the discussion of using fines in the past, and I
One
can't
of the
remember why we did not do that. but-
Mr. President, one of the things you have to be very careful about is the fact that you cannot incentivize going out and finding people. In other words, you cannot create a situation where the more tickets you give out, the more money you have coming back into your organization. That creates a real problem under state statute. So that's really the reason. In a good example of that, a lot of times are traffic fines. Or let me give you another example. Weigh stations. The weigh stations, any fines that are actually issued through the weigh stations doesn't come back to the state, it actually goes to the schools. There's a reason it doesn't come back to the state, because they don't want it to be used as a fundraising source for their general fund. So tying the two together really doesn't work, because there's really no way in state statute we can do it, and you're going to get yourself in trouble if you try. So,
Do we know, Pauline, what our fine amount is that we receive? The total dollar amount? Okay. While you're looking, we'll go. Jason, Jordan, did you have anything else? We'll go to Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What year did the what year did the contract go from 232,000 to 242?
2009.
2008 to 2009, so.
So,
In 2008, it was 235, Alderman Quaker. In 2009, it was 242.
okay. And then prior to 2008, were there significant increases, or did it stay fairly steady for a few years?
The way the contract was written prior, that's the other thing is in the past, we've had 5-year contracts. And the way they were designed is they started out at a set fee, and each year it increased by the 3% or the cost of living, whichever was lesser. It was the wording in it. Last year, due to the economy and things of that nature, they went from a 5-year contract to a 1-year contract. That's the reason we're back again already.
Okay. So, and here's where I'm, excuse me, here's where I'm going with this question is the calls for service. Can you lay out that trajectory for me? I mean, what was it doing in 2008 versus the projection in
Give me just a second,
2011?
Sam, and I can tell you exactly what it has in the last 5 years. In 2004, we had 2,923 calls. 2005 was 2,566. 2006, 2,885. 2007, 3,153. 2008, it went up to 3,840. Last year, we went over the 4,100 mark. Biggest reasoning in that, if you look at the last 2 years, the 2008 and 2009, and also look at how much property the city annexed from the county.
So the 4,100 calls, those are all city calls?
Biggest share of them are, yes.
Okay. What would you say the percentage is?
75%.
Oh, it's 75 to 80%.
Okay.
We do very little for the county in the last 2 years.
So if you get a call on a dog out by Worcester or Walm, what do you do?
Normally, the sheriff's office takes care of it first. If it becomes a situation they can no longer handle, then they contact us, and through our contract, We are paid by the hour, by the mile to go assist.
All right, thank you.
Further comments, we'll go to Bill Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I can assume then, Ms. Okrepke, that over this period of time, we have really not increased the staff or increased the labor part of the budget for the Humane Society.
Actually, we're down. Actually, right now,
We're
we are
down.
down.
You're down. So
Because
you're-
we have some unfilled positions.
So your labor costs are down because you can't fill the position. Your yearly pickup of animals is increasing. I don't have my calculator, but it's increasing substantially. Mr. President, I'd like to direct a question to Pauline, if I could.
Go ahead.
Pauline, do you know how much money is left in the council contingency fund for 2010?
200,000,
Is still left in there?
yes.
And what did
Now,
we
there is
budget?
a commitment for $40,000 for elections, if I'm not mistaken.
Just give me a bottom line, if you would, please.
That didn't work. For 2010, it would be approximately $136,500 that would be remaining. There's a commitment for $40,000 for, it's actually for the secondary election. There is a commitment for $10,000 for one of the investigations that was completed. And then there's also, I think it's $13,500 for the fraud hotline, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, and, Mr. President, there also may be also a commitment to the doll of about 15,000. That is, they just presented that just the other day. We'll have to, council is not aware of that one yet.
So to me, it looks like we will be turning back about $100,000
Pauline?
of the contingency fund. Pauline?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Give or take a few thousand. It looks like to me we're going to be turning back about $100,000 back into the general fund at the end of the year out of the council contingency fund.
That is correct.
And what is our budget for the council contingency fund for 2011?
I believe that is still $200,000.
200,000. My recommendation, I'm not going to make the motion because I've been talking to this matter, but my recommendation is we take this to legal and finance or public works, it doesn't matter to me, with the recommendation that we fund the $36,300 out of council contingency.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to put this item on legal and finance agenda and fund the shortfalls to the Humane Society of $36,300 out of council contingency. Pauline jumped right up there and turned her light on, so we'll go to her. Pauline?
Thank you. I would just like clarification if that's for the 2010 budget year or if it's 2011, and so we can do that into their contract.
It's for 2010. Is that correct with the seconder? Discussion will go to Mayor Hanks.
Thank you. My recommendation is you look at 2011. The reason for that is the contingency is all in place. We're talking about the proposed 2011 budget fiscal year. The other thing, keep in mind, is we have $100,000 left in the current contingency. We are very limited as far as what we have left as far as our snow removal budget, and has always been the practice of the City Council. If indeed we run short on our snow removal budget, that we look at the council contingency. If you're going to look at this, the appropriate thing to do is look at the 2011 you'll have more flexibility there. That'd be my recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Okay, thank you very much. Have you done a study, like, because it seems like right now you have pretty expansive hours. Have you done a study to see, like, which of, like, when you are the busiest? Like, to see, like, if you were going to cut, like, you know, if you had to cut hours, where you would cut?
We have, that's the reason we no longer open on Monday and Tuesday, and we are open on Sundays.
Okay.
Wednesday is very busy because we've been closed for 2 days. And then Sunday, it was the busiest adoption day we've ever had, or it can be very slow.
Hit
But it's a
and
good day
miss.
for families to come in. So there's a lot of humane societies that are open 7 days a week, and we know we can't do that. So we have played with the hours, adjusted them this year to add Sunday so that we could be more family friendly.
Okay. We talked a little bit earlier about the microchip. You know, what, it seems like other humane societies, I would think, have, perhaps as a cost-cutting measure, have stopped using that. I don't know. I'm just asking you, what have you read? What have you?
For the most part, no, but also at the same time, under city and county ordinance, we have to microchip the animals.
Well, that's something we could explore, so that's what I'm just trying to, because it sounds like you are just kind of eking by, and so I'm trying to,
The benefit of a microchip versus the cost variation is so minimal that the benefit so outweighs the cost that we'd be stuck with a whole bunch more animals without the microchip.
The faster we can get them back to their families, the better off the animal is, the better off we
so
are.
people don't
space-wise.
come looking for their animal then? They've-
Some
Not
do,
nearly as often
but
as you think they should.
Not as, no.
Okay, because I would be coming right at your door looking for my little baby. Okay, I'm in support of helping this, so thank you.
Just for clarification, I misheard Mr. Davis. It's for 2011. It wasn't for 2010. Is that all right with the seconder? Okay. It is for the 2011 budget. Further comments, Jordan Mason.
Thank you. I, with the mayor, am kind of concerned that if we take the $35,000 and grant it today out of our contingency, I guess my concern is that what happens next year and the year after that and so forth. To me, it seems like we're just kicking the can down the road here. I guess that concerns me. Going back to something I was previously talking about, I guess I would like to ask Mr. Krepke, is it my understanding that a lot of the microchipping inoculations are more, not necessarily just for the animals, but for the safety of the community as a
Yes.
whole?
Rabies vaccinations are definitely for the safety of the people. And the spaying and neutering that we do on every animal that's adopted out is a long-term part of the solution to having as many strays as we have. We have cats who are by fall on their third litter of kittens because they haven't been spayed. So the more that we can reduce the random breeding, the more we reduce the number of animals that come into the shelter. But it doesn't happen in a year. It happens over a longer period of time. So we're trying to look to the future with a lot of what we're doing with the spaying and neutering and the low-cost spaying and neutering for the community.
Appreciate that, Ms. Krepke. I have an additional question for the mayor. Previously, you mentioned that using fines to fund other services could get tricky with our state statutes, and I guess I'm confused because if we are trying to use fines to incentivize compliance with the law in order to promote the public health, safety, and welfare, I don't understand how that doesn't fall under our police powers. And I was hoping for some sort of clarification on that, Mr. Hanks.
I think it's probably a better question for the city attorney because they're the one that actually had the opinion. You have to be very careful not to incentivize the issuance of fines. It's one thing to have a governmental entity issue a fine as long as that the proceeds of that fine don't come back and actually fund the same organization that's issuing it. So, I mean, and I guess I'll yield to Joel. I think maybe he can give us a little bit better of an explanation.
Well, we were just talking about, first of all, the fines that we collect from animal control type tickets at this point, which would be, usually it's the barking dog or animals at large, are going to be extremely minimal. You're not going to probably generate significant revenue from those at this point. In fact, I think Chief Allender was saying that the municipal ordinance violations currently generate about 80,000 total, which the vast majority of that would probably be speeding tickets. I'm not real up on the, as far as not being able to use it. What I will say is, I'm sure you can all appreciate that if right now, say we're generating $1,000 a year or $2,000 a year in fines, and then you tie the funding of the Humane Society contract to the fines, and all of a sudden the fines jump to $10,000 or $12,000 a year, that would be a cause for concern. You know, the old adage, one of the reasons they got rid of the Justice of the Peace in South Dakota is because you had a town Justice of the Peace, you drive through town, and you get a speeding ticket, and their salary was paid by the fines they imposed. So what do you think happened? Imposed a lot of fines. So generally, yes, you try not to tie it so directly to that. I would leave it at that at this point. If you have further questions about the legality of actually doing it, I would want to look at that further.
Appreciate that, Mr. Lundin. I guess fundamentally what I'm getting at is that I'm concerned that if we, like I said previously, that I would like to explore some actual long-term solutions to this issue instead of just supplementing it out of a contingency fund today and then having to readdress this tomorrow. So instead of kicking this can down the road, I guess I'd kind of like to explore some true options and real solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Pauline, would you give us that dollar amount for fines that were collected?
In 2009, the total court fines for the whole year, and that this is for all infractions, was $41,545.
All infractions, okay. Is there any further comments from the council? Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, the Humane Society does a very valuable job for the city of Rapid City. Without it, I think the chief would tell you that we'd be sending patrol officers out there, calling them off basically their responsibilities to deal with an awful lot of these calls. But one of the other things that has hurt the Humane Society in the last couple of years is the fact that Pennington County basically pulled back on their contract. Kent, and if I'm not mistaken, it was a couple of years ago, they went from they cut dramatically back, and the only thing the county is currently paying on is, I believe, the housing of the animals. Is that?
The county pays by the piece. It's X dollars per day for day one. The other 2 days of boarding under ordinance or state statute, either way, both of them say 72 hours. So no matter how you look at it, it's a 72-hour period, they pay that. And what, as I spoke to earlier, if they do have animal control issues, like we still handle all the bites, they take the initial report. I make sure the animals get to the vet at the end of the 10-day quarantine period and things of that nature for them. And they do pay us by the hour and then by the mile for anything we put in.
Yep. So just so you know that Humane Society as far had an impact to their budget based upon the reduction in revenue that they receive from the county. So
prior to in the contracts when the city county was one entity, it was a 70-30 split. So basically you could take what you're paying now and add 30% to that. However, our duties for the county has greatly reduced as well. I'm probably doing 4 and 5 calls a month versus 40 and 50.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to put this on the legal and finance agenda to fund $36,300 out of the 2011 council contingency. Further discussion on that motion? Being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank all of you for coming.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is the 2011 budget review. Are there comments or discussion on why we're here this evening? We'll go to Jordan Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Kroger. It was my understanding that we were setting up these meetings for two reasons. First and foremost, that there were some issues that I may be speaking just for myself, but I believe I'm speaking for some other council members that unfortunately few of those couldn't join us tonight. But there were issues that were unfortunately not resolved. And then secondly, also to start this process earlier so we could start these discussions instead of railroading numerous issues and at the last minute. And so I guess to me, some of the issues that were addressed dealt with leasing of vehicles and different issues that were brought up, and I would assume that we would discuss some of those issues. Thank you.
Further discussion or comments? Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is an item, there are a number of items on the CD that we received today, and one of the items is on a long-term debt. And I want to thank Pauline for putting all of this information together. I know she put a lot of work into this. But I'm looking at the spreadsheet on long-term debt. The name of the spreadsheet is called debt structure. It's the debt structure PDF file. And I'm seeing that a number of these are bonds that have a range to the interest rate, but I think it's more difficult to refinance a bond, and none of the interest rates appear to be much higher than 5 or 5.5%, so I'm not sure it makes sense to try to refinance any of those. But I do see a Civic Center bond, or I'm sorry, a Civic Center loan for $302,000 that's on an interest rate of 6.25%, and it looks like there's been a request to refinance that. Is that something that this body can endorse and move forward on, or does it need action by the council to move forward on, and can we do that as soon as possible?
Mayor Hanks.
There we go. Pauline and I have talked about this. She has been in contact with those folks, and my understanding is that we're actually in the process of going through and looking at refinancing that already, so that it's already moving forward. And if it's all right with the chair, I would certainly be willing to go through each and every one of these and give a little bit of an explanation as far as what each one of these obligations are, because it's not terribly clear.
I don't think that's necessary unless somebody else.
I'd sort of like to. I spent about 3 hours actually going through this, so I think it'd be important to, if you ask for the information, quite honestly, I spent 3 hours making sure we had all this. It'll take me about 3 minutes.
3?
Yep, I can go through it very, very quickly.
Okay.
Okay, first one, if you look at the very top, the $3 million, that was actually a CIP bond that was taken out back in 2002. I believe that under Mayor Shaw that they went out and actually put some more money into streets. The next one, which is $732,000, this was a CIP. This was a refinance. There again, they had borrowed some money against the CIP proceeds. The next one, the $9,130,000, that was actually a dollar amount that was borrowed back in 2005, I believe, and that was for the .16 fund. They went out and did a bunch of infrastructure improvements. The $11,900,000, that is the first bond for 2012, and that's going to be paid off in 2012. The next one, the $8 million, that was the second bond that went out, and that was for the ice arena, and that will be paid off in 2014. If you remember, I told you that if we do a pay-as-you-go for 2012, everything we'd have a clean ledger as of 2015. Those are the two outstanding obligations for 2012. The $3.2 million, that was actually the Red Rocks Reservoir, and that is actually we have a request into the state. The money is there, and we're looking to pay that off. So that one will go away very quickly as long as the state allows us to. The next one is the ladder truck. That's $492,000. That is basically a lease purchase of the ladder truck that we did back in 2008. And then in 2010, we did a lease purchase on 2 fire trucks, 2 engines, and that's $861,000. And then if you drop down, the next one, Loan 5, that's $9.9 million. That was that is a state revolving loan fund for improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, actually adding the new line on. The next one is a parking bond revenue, and that is for the parking ramp, and that is going to be paid off in 2020. That's $2.3 million. The big one is the water revenue bonds. That's $45 million. That is for the Jackson Springs Water Treatment Plant. The next one, which is $595,000, that is actually the TSA building out at the airport. That is actually paid back through the leaser's rent payments. The next one, which is $2.6 million, there again, that's the MRF refinancing. That was the dollar amount that is still left on the MRF that was refinanced here just recently within, I think, a year and a half. 2008. Very good. Thank you. The next one, the $5.1 million, that is the dollar amount the Civic Center went out and borrowed, and they used that for parking, roofs, theater, FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the new ice arena. Meadowbrook Golf Course, $212,000. That was for the cart barn. We just refinanced that in the last year or two. The parking lot expansion for $440,000. And that will be paid off. Now, that's at 6.3%, but that will be paid off right after the first of the year, so it doesn't make any sense to go out and refinance it. That'll be paid off here very shortly. The ambulance lease, $413,000. There again, that's a lease purchase on ambulance. Civic Center lease, $302,000, and there again, that was the 6.2 that Alderman Quaker referred to. That was for the purchase of POS software, point of sale software for the Civic Center when they actually expanded. And the last one is garbage trucks. When we bought the new garbage trucks, $1.8 million. And there again, that is a lease purchased. The one thing I would point out is if you actually take a look at our obligations under our general fund obligations, in other words, what are we actually making payments on out of our general fund, not enterprise funds, it is $5,176,000 are the total obligations, not payments, but the total obligations we have. If you actually also take a look, a number of these will actually be being paid off in the next couple of years. And there's the other question, which is sort of interesting. I think it's important to bring this point up. The grand total that we have now, as far as indebtedness, is $106 million. If you compare that to a lot of the communities, especially on the east and the west coast, that have bumped up against their ability to borrow, in other words, their state constitutional debt limits. Anybody want to take a guess at what Rapid City's constitutional debt limit is? $1,770,000,000. Where we are basically less than 10% of what we can borrow under state statute. So there again, I think that's a big kudos to not only this council but previous councils, because we have been very fiscally conservative in how we go out and borrow money. With that, did I make it in 3 to 5 minutes?
I didn't check, but Mayor, while you're up there, I don't have my laptop set up. So is there anything else on this disc that needs to be reviewed?
Maybe. I'll leave it up to you, or maybe.
Bonnie.
And just, I'd be happy to provide that spreadsheet for everyone.
You had said MRF earlier, and I just didn't know what that stood for.
The MRF, the recycling plant out of the landfill.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sam, did you have anything else?
Oh, Mike, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. Could we just get a supplementary sheet? Yeah, you have something you can just send us with the itemization of that. I didn't quite catch the $8 million bond from 2007. What was that again?
That's actually the second bond. If you're looking right up top, Alderman Quaker, the $8,055,000. That was actually the second bond issue that the council went out for to pay for the increased cost of the ice arena. If you remember, the council at the time had bonded for 2012, and they had to go out and do a second bond because the ice arena came in over budget. And that what is scheduled to be paid off in 2014. I will give everyone a copy of this because I actually have it down so it has an explanation. Be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sam?
Not on this, but I have some other things. Bring that up now, or is there anybody else that wanted to talk about the debt structure?
Is there any other questions on the debt structure? Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Kroger. I do have a question for Ms. Sumption, and I do appreciate the layout here. I did notice, however, that the total debt in this spreadsheet for our city is different than what was in our CAFA report, which states that it's $122,914,234, and here it says $106,298,000. I'm just curious what the Why the difference?
Pauline?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is because this is what the city is responsible for as of today. What you see in the audit, number one, is what was due at the end of 2009. In addition to that, we are required to put into our CAFR the amounts for compensated balances, which is any sick leave or vacation leave that employees are entitled to if they are to cease employment with the city. And we're also required to report the landfill closure liability, if we ever decide to close the landfill, how much that would cost. And then also all the tax increment districts are included in that first number you gave from the CAFR from 2009. I do not put this on here because I don't believe that's the city's debt. All of our agreements with those developers and with the bank say that we are no way guaranteeing that this, whatever they generate on property taxes, is going to pay that loan off, nor is the city responsible for making sure that loan gets paid off. So that responsibility falls back onto the developer once the sales or the property taxes cease. So it's not truly a debt of the city, even though we make payments as we go as part of the agreement.
Thank you for the explanation. I do appreciate that. That was my only question regarding the debt.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sam?
Thank you. The other question is I'm looking at the files here on the adjustments of above step A. Do we have an approximate count of how many of those adjustments have occurred?
I don't have a count, I'm sorry.
Okay.
This year, I believe there was one. Last year, I believe there were two. And then we also have 2007, and there were a number of those. Let me see if I can bring it up.
We had 2 this year,
Was it two this year?
from September.
Okay. For the way we have this broken down was everything prior from May of 2004 to June of 2007. Pauline, do you have this set up the same way I do?
This is August.
Okay. I can give you that number. From May of 2004 to June of 2007, we used that, and there were 31 that were actually hired above, I believe, a D. And then in the last couple of years, Pauline?
Above a D.
Yes, or above an A, I'm sorry, above an A.
Okay. And then here is
And this is July 2007 through March of 2009. What do you got there?
15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Okay, we have 30, and then we should also have in 2010.
There's this one, two on this one from April to August.
So from April 2009 to August of 2010,
There's 2.
there's 2.
And then 2 from September to November.
Okay.
That's just a quick count.
There again, we're happy to provide that for you. To be honest with you, this is about the first time I've had an opportunity to look at it, was just now, so.
Okay.
So just if I could summarize, so basically from 2004 to 2007, we had 31 above step A. From middle of 07 to sometime in 09, we had about 32. And then since then, we had another 2. So we had basically 65 over the last 6 years, approximately. So I'm not sure how many of those were below step D, but it is my view that if there is to be an adjustment above step A, it's my opinion that the council should vote on that. And if it's a worthwhile adjustment, I'm sure that the council will go along with that. But allowing an administrative adjustment process, I think, puts the city in a tough position because I think from a standpoint of ensuring stability of the wage study process, I think it's best that those any adjustment above step A come to the city council for a vote, so that it is transparent and consistent with the rest of the wage study process. And so that is my recommendation. And I don't know if I can offer a motion to that at this point, but I do think that it is important that we do that.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to respectfully disagree with Alderman Quaker. Quite honestly, if you remember, I actually have a standing policy. Anytime I hire anybody above an A, I notify the council. Anybody that gets hired above a D needs council approval. I will tell you that over the weekend, I got blamed for an awful lot of pay increases that I had nothing to do with. Had nothing to do with it. And the reason I say that is the Condrey study was adopted in 2005. I was in the state legislature in 2005. The mayor doesn't get a vote on the Condrey study. But yet I seem to have gotten blamed for that. If I'm going to get blamed for the policy on salaries in the city of Rapid City, I take the opposite view. Give me the flexibility to think what I do is right. If you're going to blame me, at least give me the authority to put people on the pay matrix where I believe they're appropriate to fit based upon their experience. Simple request. Keep in mind, the mayor does not set salaries. I do not get a vote, with the exception of I can place people on the pay matrix between A and D. That's the only flexibility I have. I didn't get a vote on the pay matrix. And anything above that, anything above a D, the council votes for anyway. So, if you want to talk about the appropriate authority as far as setting salary, the council wants to take that total responsibility, that's fine. Take the blame too. You don't get it both ways.
Sam, did you have anything else?
I do, and we're talking about a couple of different things here. I mean, first of all, relating to the adjustments above step A, from a transparency standpoint, there should be a vote by the city council before there's an adjustment. Regarding the implementation of the Condrey study, the economy changed between the adoption of the Condrey study and 2008, 2009, and everybody knows that. And so I think that there are important distinctions that need to be made. I think that the any adjustments of the wage scale need to come in front of the city council for a vote. I remember back in 2003 when Mayor Hanks was on the city council, he and I together and others had a concern about the fact that a top city official had received a 4-step pay increase for previous years of service, and Councilman Hanks and I worked together on that, along with others, to make sure that there was transparency there. And I think that it's important that we take that transparency to the next level. And if there's going to be a wage adjustment on the Condrey study, that we simply have a public vote on that. And so that is my request, and I'd like to see what the rest of the committee thinks on that, and hopefully someone will offer that as a motion. Thank you.
Further discussion? We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Okay, thank you. When you go from step A to step B, is it like a set percentage? I mean, I'm wondering what we're talking about here, percent-wise. Is there
2.5%. 2.5% between each one of the steps.
a step? Okay. I like transparency, but I think, I don't know, I think we're kind of micromanaging the mayor's ability to make any kind of decision. So I have concerns about that. I think transparency-wise, we could just publish what the salary ended up being in a different step or something. But I don't know. I don't really see the advantage of it. Thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you. We do have a policy on the books, and that is any time that any employee is offered a position above a step A, the council is automatically notified of that. That's a commitment that I started making. In reference to what Alderman Quaker was stating was, and he is correct, back in 2003, there was no transparency whatsoever. The mayor could put anything, anybody, anywhere on the pay matrix and not notify the council. I do not agree with that. But if you're talking about transparency, what I'm telling you is the fact that if indeed that, well, I'll be a little bit kinder. We have absolute transparency right now because the council, anything above an A, the council is notified. Anything above a D, it takes council action to actually vote on that. What I'm saying is the fact that if I'm going to be held accountable, at least give me the authority to do something about it. If not, the council needs to step up and take the responsibility, both the good and the bad, for salary decisions.
Further comments? Sam?
I want to make sure that we're clear as to what we're talking about here. We're talking about adjustments within the Condrey study of up to 4 steps. We're not talking about the implementation of the Condrey study, and I want to make sure that the two issues aren't confused, because they are indeed distinct. I mean, I and others have concerns on the Condrey study itself, particularly as it relates to top management, but I think that is a different discussion. What we're talking about here is adjustments from A to D, and I think that we've come a long way in transparency. We have a little way to go, and I think that if the increase is justified, it can wait for a few days until the council has voted on that increase, because otherwise you run into the situation of other employees saying later on that they didn't receive the same consideration because people don't all see the email. The email goes to the council. It doesn't go to the media, doesn't go to other employees, doesn't go to the unions, and it just goes to the 10 council members. And so it is for that reason why I think it's so important that when any step adjustments are made for new hires or rehires, that the council be informed before the adjustment is made and to endorse the adjustment. I think that is a simple policy change, and I would encourage this council to strongly think about that and to do that.
Further comments? Any further comments? Sam Quaker.
Thank you. I'm going to offer a motion to ask that we convene a monthly budget hearing or monthly budget meeting similar to this. And if I can get a second, I'll explain a little bit more of what I'm thinking.
there a second to that motion? Okay, further discussion, Sam?
Thank you. First of all, I think, since we have several members absent, I think having another hearing in January would be fine, but having another hearing within the next couple of months is a good idea, and having more periodic hearings is a good idea. And I also think that we need to see if we can work with some of our legislators in the municipal league to change the time frames of the budgeting, so that we can have a little bit more leeway in the fall, so that we can have the budget adopted closer to the end of the year rather than October 1. Perhaps there's a good reason why it's set up the way that it is, but I have a feeling it's that way because that's the way it's always been, and I think it's time to take a look at that. Pauline, do you happen to know the history of why sorry to put you on the spot. Do you happen to know the history of why budgets are done that way, and if you have any guess on what the reaction would be of the legislature if we tried to get legislation through that would allow us another month or 45 days in there?
Pauline?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the reason why is because the county needs that number by October 1st, that number that we're requesting on property tax, so that when the equalization office goes out and does the evaluations, they can get that total tax dollar that is needed between all the entities spread amongst that base, so that way they know what the mill levy is going to be for the following year. I believe it has to do with the county's process and not necessarily ours on that one. As far as reactions, I'm thinking you might get a little resistance from the county because that really puts them up against a crunch to get it done by the January 1 date. This allows them the 3 months to get it done. So that's just my opinion, though.
Because one of the other options is to, and this is an argument that others have made, is to move elections back to April, which I don't want to do, because I think people like to have elections in June. The weather's nicer to go vote. So I don't know. I'm just trying to think of options, and it seems like there's got to be a way to streamline the process so that we're not stuck with trying to make a decision at the last minute. So I guess in absence of other ideas on how to change the process, I think having a monthly budget meeting to get an update on where we're at sales tax wise, to get an update on where we're at revenue wise, and to see where the administration is at in terms of the budgeting picture for the following year. I think that a monthly meeting is a worthwhile step for now. Thank you.
Pauline?
If I might, state law does require that the budget be presented to the council at the first meeting in June, or that the 1st of June, or actually it's the 1st of July. But I think the mayor has been very good this last year at getting it to you guys in June. If you guys would set a hearing date before July, knowing that there is a chance that some may not be here again, at least we can at least start the discussions a little earlier. But that's something that you as a council need to decide, because once the mayor hands it to you, it's up to council leadership to start the meetings and to schedule those. So just future reference.
Okay. Further comments, we'll go to Bill Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't want us to have meetings just for the sake of having meetings, but if we're going to have a monthly budget meeting, then I would want, itemized issues and concerns that we're going to discuss. Tonight, we really don't have, Mr. Quaker had some, and Mr. Mason had some, but I'm thinking if we're going to schedule a meeting, say, in January, just for budget, then council members should be sending the information to council leadership in the mayor's office saying, these are the items that I want to talk about. And then if we have a lot of issues or a lot of different items that council members want to talk about, then we can carry some over to the following month. But just to have a meeting and call it a budget meeting and then sit up here and just kind of talk in circles, I don't want to have one of those. But if we can be very specific about what we're going to talk about and have an agenda, then I'm all for it, because I understand the budgeting process is very long, it's very tiring, it gets very confusing, it puts the department heads and city employees into a mode where they're here and they have to be here at this meeting or at this meeting, and it just kind of snowballs until we finally get it done. And then when we get to the point where we're voting on it, we're not sure whether we should vote on it or not vote on it, and then we start having meetings all over again. So I would like to use the rifle effect versus the shotgun effect and have specific items to talk about. So I'll vote in favor of it with the caveat that we are going to have specific agenda items, and if we're going to talk about personnel or salary increases or the Condrey study or whatever, that we have those items listed and we go through them, and if we need to set a time limit, say 8 o'clock, and then if we don't get to all the items, we carry it over to the next meeting. Thank you.
Further comments? Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. If the council would like to actually take up something very specific, that would certainly take the burden off staff. I will tell you, just trying to put things together for today's meeting, I would speculate between the finance office and my office, we probably have 40, 50 hours worth of work putting together these numbers. Quite honestly, we don't have that kind of staff time to do that every month. If you want to take something up specific, absolutely. I mean, if narrow it down, but to actually reproduce all the reports, because it is not easy. I know Pauline spent a couple days going through IFAS, putting together the reports. Like I say, we don't have enough time in the day to get the work done we need to do already. And to start, taking 40 hours of work time a month out to do this, quite honestly, is not terribly productive. Now, having said that, it's also very, very important that we keep the elected officials informed. If you have something very specific that you want to have a budget hearing about and set something, talk about the number of FTEs, and that's all we talk about, that makes it a lot easier. Or if you want to talk about a specific department, that's easy. But quite honestly, I burned up a tree here, printing up where we were year to date on all of our cost centers, and I spent pretty much the whole day going through it because it was 180 pages long.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Okay, thank you. One reason I like this meeting is that, we never meet unless we're in public at a formal meeting to brainstorm ideas. And we all, we all bring something to the table. But I do agree that the subject should be delineated. But I think it has value to brainstorm ideas and kick things around. So I see a lot of value in that. I don't know if it needs to be done monthly, but there's, I think, a lot of value in it, and I would certainly be glad to contribute topics or whatever for future meetings. Thank you.
Further comments? Jordan Mason.
Thank you. I guess I'm kind of confused here because I feel like I'm getting two conflicting messages. First, during our budget hearing, it was very clear that bringing up the concerns we did was perceived to be somewhat inappropriate. And if I remember correctly, the phrase used was because it was coming to us at the 11th hour. And now today, as we're trying to look ahead and plan ahead, we're being told that this is inappropriate because now we're trying to bring up issues that were already discussed. And I'm looking at the meeting minutes, issues over the leasing of vehicles, certain positions, the structure of, what is this, our development department. There were numerous issues that were brought up. and weren't fully addressed, and now we're being told that we shouldn't be talking about them. I guess I'm frankly confused as to where we sit. Are we going to continue to discuss these things throughout the year, or do we want to wait till last minute? And I guess I would kind of like to hear an answer to that question at this point. Thank you.
Well, I guess to start off with, I did have Trudy send an email to everyone because no one knew exactly what was going to take place tonight regarding this budget. And I did ask for if any of the council members wanted any information and if they wanted to share that, so we kind of knew where we were going. And I agree with Bill. I mean, it's certainly important to have these meetings, especially the way the economy is. And I don't mind having them. But let's put some items on the agenda so we can discuss them. The mayor was exactly right. No one had a clue. I didn't have a clue that we had this today put together. Otherwise, I would have set my laptop up to look at it. But no one even informed me that we had anything to talk about tonight. So, you know, the motion on the floor is to have a monthly meeting starting in January. I support that. But let's put items on the agenda so we have an agenda. And if there's items that need to be discussed, we'll certainly discuss them. But as Bill said, you know, let's not have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. There again, I made this recommendation during the budget hearing, and I'm not opposed to having monthly updates or discussions about specific items dealing with the budget. There again, keep in mind, it's the same thing, I'm going to repeat myself, and that is the fact that really the time where we can start getting a feel of what we can look at for the next budget cycle is the middle of February, because we'll have year-end numbers. Up until that point, you can talk conceptually about what's happening, but until you close out the year end, it's very difficult to make any kind of projections, not 6 months out, but I mean, you're literally 2 years out. Because if you start making projections in January of 2011 for the following fiscal year, and now you're going to go out to literally December of 2012 is what you're trying to project. That's why I'm suggesting you can certainly have a meeting in January. We'd be happy to come and provide information. But as far as really getting the crux of how we ended up with the year, it's going to be the middle of February before we have those numbers. That's when we'll have the sales tax numbers. That's when Pauline and the finance office is going to be able to present you a complete printout of where we ended up at the end of the year. Is that fair? So, like I say, we're certainly happy to attend any time that you'd like. But there again, if you're going to have a meeting in January, my suggestion is have it over a specific question. And then in February, we can have an update, how we did on sales tax, how we did on property taxes, how we did on expenses, how we did on revenue.
Thank you, Mayor. Further comments will go to Gary Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't want to keep beating this horse, but I think it is incumbent on the council to come up with what we're going to discuss. Going through the first budget hearing, for me, at the last minute, it seemed we did get hit. Let's get rid of this department. Let's cut this subsidy. Let's do this all at the last minute. And it threw us into another meeting, and another meeting. I'll have no problem on doing a monthly meeting if we do have definite items from council members. If we don't, I want that meeting canceled. I don't want to come here and waste my time just sitting and listening to people rattle on. It'd be up to the council, though. Let's get our ideas in, and let's make it work. And we get the numbers in February. Let's start trying to really work to get this budget going and not have those last-minute items that came up this past year. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. For the comments, Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think part of the confusion is, at least it was my understanding, and I did send an additional list, but it was my understanding that this meeting tonight, we were going to go through the items that were brought up at those last couple of budget hearings, including the concerns that Alderwoman Hadcock had on Community Resources Department, including the concerns that I had on the City Attorney's Office. There were a number of items that were already identified, and for whatever reason, they weren't on tonight's agenda, and that's okay. They can just be put on the January agenda. But as Alderman Mason, stated a little bit ago, that information is right in the right in the minutes, and we can start by putting bullet points of those items. You know, one of the things that I think is really important to discuss is the availability of more frequent income statements for the various enterprise funds. We do get cash flow statements once in a while, but it's hard to find meaning in those. You know, I think that's an item that I would like to see on the January agenda. Also, an updated revenue projection on sales tax, which I'd asked for tonight, but I understand there probably hasn't been a whole lot of checks coming in since recently. But there were some items identified at the budget hearing that could have and probably should have been on the agenda tonight. So the intent of my motion, if it's okay with whoever seconded it, is that the January, that we not meet in December, but the January agenda include those bullet point, you know, include the items that were raised at those last couple of budget hearings. And so if it's okay with the seconder, I'd like to make that my intent. And then also part of the intent is that it'd be incumbent of all the council members by the end of the year to make sure they let the mayor's office and council leadership know what their additional items are that they would like to put on the put on that agenda. So perhaps that agenda can be sent out to the council sometime in December. If there's any additional items that can be added, they can be added at that time. And then by the end of the year, then the agenda is set and we have a meeting in January. So hopefully that's good direction for going forward. Thank you.
Further comments? Dave Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support the concept of the budget review meetings, and I agree with Councilman Waugh. We don't need meetings for the sake of just having meetings. But I think we really have kicked this around a little bit, but I want to be very clear that I believe that we need to have a specific agenda with very targeted items on it, not this blank agenda that we have tonight. Alderman Mason, you mentioned that you felt that maybe that you were getting the runaround, so to speak, that subjects might be inappropriate. And I have to say, I don't believe any subject that's been brought up tonight, in my opinion, is inappropriate. And the only thing I question is that it's certainly not inappropriate if we know that we're going to speak to it. And it isn't just us. This blank agenda begs to violate every open meeting law that we have, because everything we do works around and with the budget. We could bring up any subject that works around or with the city, and it would be relative to the budget. There's not a citizen, there are very few citizens out here that aren't related to the city. Actually, you are, aren't you? I didn't recognize you back there. Welcome. Very, very few here that aren't related to the city to witness what's going on tonight, because there was nothing on the agenda highlighting what we might discuss. That's not fair to our citizenry. That frightens me, because we could go anywhere tonight. I think we need to be very, very clear with what we're going to put on that agenda. And I think we really need to Alderman Koiker mentioned that it should be put upon each one of us to get those subjects to council leadership. Council leadership, I would challenge you even further. I would ask that you would put together a procedure so we know how you want those subjects brought to you, and that we know that they are, in fact, added to that budget meeting agenda, so that we know what items are going to be on there, so that we are prepared, each one of us, so that when we come to that budget meeting, we've got an idea what we need to prepare for to represent our individual wards. So that would be I don't think it needs to be in the form of a motion, but certainly a challenge, Ron, that we have a way that we all know how you want to have that agenda built, and that we then have an opportunity to research it, because, like you, I didn't know there was going to be a disc tonight, and quite frankly, I was a little concerned that this could become a witch hunt, because we just don't know what subject might be brought up, and I'm not prepared, and I can't imagine how anyone out here can be totally prepared, because we don't know what we're discussing, and that's, I don't think that's fair to staff, and I think that's extremely unfair. So I think we beat this up pretty well tonight. I think we're pretty much all in the same point of agreement that we need to build an agenda that people can plan towards, and that we can start working productively through each one of these meetings. Thank you.
Further comments, Jordan Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Kroger, and appreciate the latitude here. I, with everyone else, am absolutely for having meetings, not for just having meetings, but for a set purpose, and I guess that's possibly where there's some sort of miscommunication here. In the September 27th Special City Council meeting, we decided unanimously that we would have, and I guess I'll read these, a November-December budget hearing. That was voted on and approved. And then it also was approved that we would bring the recommendations, which one of them was Quaker recommended that this item be addressed at the future budget hearings. That was in dealing with the leasing. There was another recommendation to be referred to the upcoming budget hearings. All these items were referred to this meeting, and yet they aren't listed. Why? I'm absolutely with you. We have a blank agenda, and I think we're on the same page. Why? Are we sitting up here making recommendations just to make recommendations without any force behind them? Are we impotent? I'm frankly kind of upset at this, because I thought that we were clearly on the same page, that we were going to agree to approve the budget. We sat together and made that decision unanimously, and that we were going to take these recommendations to this meeting. But frankly, I'm not frightened, but I am indignant towards the fact that we are faced with a blank agenda. I am indignant that all of our recommendations are for naught, and I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Further comments? I guess I'll just make one comment. There is a blank agenda, but everyone got an email asking if they wanted to put something on the agenda or if they needed information. So if being there was nothing on there and that stuff was directed to be at a budget meeting, then I think it was appropriate that the council members that talked about those items at the budget hearing said, hey, this was supposed to be on the agenda tonight. It's not. I want it on there. So the bottom line is we have a motion on the floor is to have another budget hearing in January, starting in January, monthly. I've heard a request tonight that the items to be on that agenda so far are the bullet points from the budget discussions. I don't know if the mayor's office has those. Tracy, you originally had those. You got those that you can get us to us. There was also a request for what our income revenue for sales tax, the current one. We need that one. Anything else? Availability of income statement. You know what that is, Tracy? Is that's the enterprise one's okay. Anything else? City attorney's office. Anything else? And I guess I'll just say it again. When we send an email out and we ask if there's anything that you want on the agenda, or if you need more information, I'd like you to respond. You know, if you don't respond, it's going to be a blank agenda. Further comments, Bonnie Peterson.
Okay, thank you. I've got different ideas, things that I would like to discuss. One of them would be the snack foods that are purchased for the mayor's office, and I don't know what else, if it's all through the city or what, so to discuss that. I would like to discuss, and I don't know if the budget is the place to do it, but I guess I would like to see some brainstorming ideas, like structuring garbage bills to reward recycling, to look at a system that, how we could work it to help this sense. I mean, to me, it all boils down to money, because if you can encourage recycling, you're going to get, more money back. The other thing I would like to look at is how different enterprise funds can help other city departments. One thing that could possibly or develop relationships. One thing that was brought, that I'm thinking of is, and like I said, I could be often, way off, but ways for like the Civic Center, when they have an empty little glass case, that they could maybe showcase, if it's not being rented, to maybe showcase another department for these different funds and properties, to try to see how they can work with each other and network with each other to try to each pull each other up. Of course, there's probably all sorts of rules and laws keeping us from doing that, but I see those as being part of the budget. I don't know if my fellow councilmen see that or not, but I think we need to get these departments thinking about how they can work together to help each other out. So that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Further comments, Sam?
Thank you. I think it's important to clarify that before it's printed in the newspaper or said in the media that there was a lack of preparation for this meeting, I think it's important to point back to the minutes of the budget hearing where those items were going to be on the agenda. And I think, it's my understanding that the email came out fairly late last week. I don't know that it came out in advance of the meeting. If it did, we can discuss that later. But I did send a number of items last week, and I thought that the other items were going to be on the agenda per the official vote of the City Council a few months ago. So I realize that this has been discussed and rediscussed, but I think it's very important that we're all on the same page going forward, and that that there is more collaboration on the agenda, so that there isn't this kind of confusion at the next meeting. But there was indeed an official vote of the City Council to add these items to the agenda tonight, and we ended up with a blank agenda. So I do not think that it's fair to blame the council members who took the time to come to this meeting tonight. So thank you.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to have the next budget hearing, have monthly budget hearings, I believe it was, and the first one is to start on in January. Any further discussion on that motion? Being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Just to let everyone know, I'm scheduling a budget hearing for January 24th. Mayor.
Just a couple things, if I would. First of all, Bonnie talked about snacks. It'd be great if I could actually be reimbursed for all the animal crackers. Just, almost all the snacks that actually, a lot of that I actually pay for out of my pocket. All the snacks in the mayor's office I typically pay for. So I can buy everybody lunch again. No. The other thing is, and there again, it's a call of the council. I do have a couple simple graphs that we put together, not knowing exactly what the discussion are, but I do have an update as far as sales tax and also FTEs, if you want to take the time. It's certainly a council decision.
Yes, I'd like to hear it.
First one, sales tax. There again, we went back to 2005, so we have 10 years plus this year. As you can see, that we continue to grow on average somewhere around 4 to 5%. You can see our dip in 2009, 2010 projection. There again, year to date, and the numbers that we have are through the end of August. I'm sorry, through the end of October. which means we're on the accrual basis. And that with those numbers in, we're up about 2.5% year to date. So if you project the 2.5% out to the end of the year, that's where we'll end up. Now, I will tell you, we have been growing. At the beginning of the year, we're literally in a negative growth pattern. As we continued into the spring, it got better, and the last couple of reports have basically moved us up to 2.5%. Based upon the increase, we're probably going to be closer to 3%. I don't know if we'll get to 3.5% growth for 2010, but if indeed we do, that will put us back above 2008. We're going to cross our fingers. So there's your sales tax report. The next one, open positions. It's always good to basically give you an idea of the open positions. If you notice, the airport has none, the city attorneys have none. Civic Center has 6.25. That's a combination of retirements and also the creation of new positions. And if you actually look, oops. I'm sorry?
You might want to clarify this is as of September because
Yes, very good. And the open positions is as of September, not year-to-date. But if you notice, if you see numbers here, that means that they've actually been advertised and posted. Okay? So community resources, there's one opening. That position has been replaced, which is right here, which is Kevin Tome's position. Of course, Jeff has filled that position. Fire, there's one open position. There again, that's a position, Mike Thompson's retirement as of the 1st of December. And so that has been posted. That is included here. Whoops, let me get rid of all that. Then, growth management has 4. If you notice, 3 of those are posted, or one is not, the planner. We are not going to post it this time. There's not the need for it. But the other ones, there is a planner. There again, we had a gal that resigned as of May 5th. And then we also have 2 administrative folks, one a secretary and the other one administrative assistant. They transferred to a different department, so those positions are open, so they are posted. Library has 1. They're again replacing a resignation. When it comes to, let's see, parks, we have to figure this one out. They're over .25. We're not exactly sure what's going on there. In aquatics, we'll get that one figured out. In the police department, there's 5 openings. There again, you can see 3 of those. 2 of those have actually been posted. There's a couple other retirements that are coming up, so there again, those will be posted. Public Works, there's 3.5 that are open. There again, as you can see, every one of those have been posted. Temporary wages, there's also a question as far as what have we spent year to date. And Pauline, on temporary wages, is this through the end of October?
This was actually through, I believe it was the first payroll in November, actually.
Okay. So this is as current as you're going to get. There again, the mayor is about 1,500. You can see now it's going to, what's incredible is as far as temporary wages, that includes a lot of things. To give you an example, Public Works is only 3,500. But if you look at the next one, you're actually talking $148,000. And let me just go through this real quick. Let's see if I can get through here. As you can see, equipment maintenance is very small. Traffic engineering is very small. But then you get into a big one here. Look at this. And there again, that's $102,000, and that was, what was that?
That was ice.
That was the ice arena. And then you're going to get aquatics, $29,000. There's parks, $237,000. That's all the temporary folks during the summer that we hire. You also have the library, which is $1,600. Here's the big one. There's a swim center, $272,000. These are all temporary, in other words, seasonal workers. This one, I believe, that's Parkview, $68,000. Sioux Park, $67,000. Horseman, $17,000. Transit, $37,000. Let's see, the cemetery, $26,000. The ambulance is $3,100. Here's the real big one. This is, I believe, the Civic Center. Civic Center concessions, $445,000 in temporary wages. There again, keep in mind these are part-time temporary employees, non-benefited. The energy plant, $8,800. The ticket sales at the Civic Center, is that $93,000. RSVP had some. The library board had some. Terminal facilities. Then you get out to the airport. Civic Center maintenance is a huge one. There you go, $608,000. And here's really the bottom line. In temporary wages, year-to-date, $2,603,000 is how much we've actually spent on temporary wages. There again, and my apologies, I didn't find this a little bit earlier. This is actually a very simplified version of employees that were hired above a Step D. There again, this is after May of 2004. You can see there's a total of 30. There's each one of those positions, and it shows actually what the current step was and what the new hiree was brought in at. This is after July 2007. There were 22. And then, let's see, hired after April of 2009. So anything after 2009, there have been a grand total of 2. One was a forensic chemist, which we came to the council for, and the other one was air quality specialist, which I also emailed to the council. And the only one that we've actually done recently was actually the librarian, and she was brought at a D. The reason for that was this was a former employee. When she left, she was at a D. When we brought her back, she was at a D. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And we did vote on having the meeting, correct?
That you did.
There's no other items on the agenda, so I'd entertain a motion to, Bonnie?
Mayor, when these temporary wages, how do they compare to the last couple of years?
Actually, and I'm going to go to Pauline if I remember right. We're right on track. There's nothing unusual about it.
And all wages come out of the general fund, right?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, okay.
Keep in mind, like the Civic Center, the airport,
They have
a
their,
lot of those are
it's
enterprise
their
funds.
own, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Pauline?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2007, temporary wages were about $2.3 million. In 2008, total for the year was about $2.8 million. 2009, actual was about 3.3. What was budgeted for 2010 is 3.4 million, and that number that the mayor gave is what we actually have.
Right, which is 2.6. The reason you saw a dramatic jump from 2008 to 2009, that was the first year that we actually had the ice arena open. That added a tremendous amount of part-time temporary employees. And they're an enterprise fund, so none of that is general fund dollars.
Anything else, Bonnie?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I thought tonight was very useful and helpful because I thought we would have the items added from last time, but also that we would maybe state what concerns we had or ideas that we wanted to discuss in the future. So thank you.
Further comments? Bill Watt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to take this time to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and safe travels, whether you're leaving or you're coming to Rapid City. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Sam?
Thank you, and I think I can safely say this on behalf of all of us. I would like to just take a moment, point of personal privilege, to offer my condolences to Dolores Coffeen's family. And she gave many years of dedicated service to the city and the county. And when I first ran for city council in 2002, she took me under her wing and encouraged me, and I just want to use this opportunity to offer our condolences to her family, and we sure appreciate her service to our community. And do we have the announcement on the funeral services, Mayor?
Yes, we do. It is at 10 o'clock on Wednesday at the Open Bible. So if you're able to make it, I'm sure they would appreciate it.
And visitation is tomorrow night at Oshheim Funeral Home.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Before I take that roll call, or call the vote. The budget hearing, like stated, is going to be January 24th. I guess my question, since we have the majority of the council here, what is the time preference? 5:30 or 7? Which one?
5:30.
Probably 5:30? Okay, January 24th, 5:30. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Those opposed, we're adjourned. No. I kept asking and asking. No, I haven't heard a word. I haven't heard a word.
Charlene? Whose is this? Okay. I thought it. It's one.